Hello, and thank you for joining us at Real Estate Real Talk. I am Marilee Rowley, and I'm joined today by Boston Taylor from Guild Mortgage. And he is a friend and a loan officer, and I'm excited to get to know all of your tips and tricks about how to be a successful first-time home buyer. And so let's just hop right into it. So, first-time home buyers, how many of those do you work with as a portion of your overall clientele?
Yeah, I'd say a first-time home buyer takes up most of our clientele. I'd say closer to like 70-75%.
Okay, so
a good chunk are either first-time home buyer or move-up buyer.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you are working with the traditional residential buyer who needs all of that sort of support and guidance because they're doing it for the first time.
Right.
And you shouldn't be expected to know how to do things for the first time without support and guidance, right?
Exactly.
So what is the most important thing you would say to a first-time home buyer as they are looking at getting started?
I always think the most important thing is to meet with a loan officer face-to-face, one-on-one. I kind of compare it to like a financial advisor. You can Google and YouTube like as much as you possibly can until you're blue in the face. But I think that one-on-one consultation and guidance is really beneficial since everyone's situation is a little unique.
Right. You want to be able to ask the questions that are pertinent to you as a first-time home buyer. And it is not easy to Google and YouTube all of the things because buying a home and getting a mortgage is a huge endeavor with so many different things that can go right and can go wrong. And so it really does need to be sort of tightened up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so how do they prepare? Once they sit down with you, what advice are you going to give them?
So when we sit down, we like to have an application done. So we like to get you pre-qualified before we meet.
Okay, say what those words mean.
So yeah, there's a lot of Chinese that goes into mortgage. So we also speak English. So pre-qualified basically means that you've submitted an application and provided documents.
Okay, and what kind of information goes on the application and what kind of documents do you need?
Yeah, so we like to say we're very basic. So 3 green lights for a pre-approval. So it's credit, income, and savings.
Okay.
So we like to get all of that documentation into us. So whether that's W-2s, tax returns, bank statements. Again, each person's going to be a little bit different. And then as well as your application, it's going to provide us like your 2-year work history, your living history. We'll be able to see your credit, and kind of all of that basic information.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So you're more or less having to divulge your entire financial history and current status.
Yes.
As you apply for a mortgage loan. And so you mentioned credit, income, and savings. So let's take those one by one. What kind of credit are you looking for?
So we can go super low. So everyone obviously has that's probably one of the things that I'd like to bring up is everyone thinks they know their credit score, which usually it is accurate, looking at either Credit Karma or your American Express app. However, those are algorithms, and the scores that we take come directly from the bureaus. So what that means, again, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax are the 3 credit companies that provide us your credit score, and we take the middle of those 3. So not the highest, not the lowest, but the one in the middle.
Just as an aside, a curious question. Do you find that the credit bureaus report sort of the same? Like one is always on top, one is always in the middle, and one is always the lowest?
Yes and no. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes I think Experian's a little bit more forgiving. Some of them are higher than others. I don't know why that's the case, but they all kind of use their own different algorithm within themselves.
Very highly secretive formula
it's
for how
so
they
weird.
run.
It's so
how
weird.
they figure out who has good credit.
Right. And that's also kind of a holdup for most people is they don't want to necessarily get started if it's going to affect their credit score.
Oh, good point.
So we also have the ability to do a soft qual or a soft credit check where it doesn't affect your credit or show up as an inquiry.
Okay, and when you do the soft pull versus the hard pull, do you find that those numbers end up being different?
They're always the same.
They're always, okay.
Always the same.
Okay.
Yep.
Is it less expensive for somebody to have a soft pull versus a hard pull?
It really doesn't matter.
Okay.
I think A hard credit pull allows us to guarantee the loan. And that's what we like to
So
do.
eventually you have to have one.
Eventually you do have to have a hard check.
But the soft pull works. Okay. And then what if there are two borrowers?
Two borrowers you use, so the same principle. One person's going to have 3, the other will have 3. We'll take the middle of both, and then we use the lower of the 2.
Right. So you have to be careful who you're on a loan with. Because it's not like one person's high credit can pull up the other person's low credit and you take the average. You take whoever has the lower middle score.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And so let's talk numbers. What if you're going for an FHA loan? What's the minimum credit score you can have?
So we don't have any overlays at Guild. So what that means is there's no additional requirements beyond what FHA requires already. And we have a little bit of leniency where we can go to 540.
Oh, 540 credit score. Wow.
You can go to 540, but there are some additional requirements that we have to meet.
Okay.
But the standard is 580 is the minimum.
Okay. And so we should also clarify, an FHA loan is one that is backed by a quasi-governmental entity called the Federal Housing Authority. And because the purpose of FHA is to house Americans, they have easier or more lenient credit score, down payment, and overall qualifications to be able to get into a loan. Now, their loans can be a little bit more expensive overall, but you also get a lower interest rate when you go with an FHA loan. So that's a great loan for a first-time home buyer.
Yeah. So we like to use the reference because that's a lot of people's main question is, should I do conventional or should I do FHA, assuming they can qualify for both. So we like to say, have you ever played blackjack, like gambling?
Yes.
You probably shouldn't play blackjack, but they always tell you like the book says, right? Like the dealer will help you when you're playing. So the book says if you have like a 680 credit score, maybe go FHA. If it's higher than 680, maybe go conventional. Even though there's a difference in the interest rate, our job as a mortgage advisor is to make sure that your mortgage is helping propel and accelerate your wealth long term, not just getting you a loan to buy a house.
Right.
So with that being said, the reason and the biggest differentiator between those two, FHA has one, an upfront mortgage insurance premium, which is a little bit more expensive. Yeah. And 2, you have mortgage insurance for life. On a conventional loan, once you hit the equivalent of 20% down, your mortgage insurance drops off entirely.
Right.
So that's one of the things that we'll go over is show the comparisons, not just initially on the loan and what your payment's going to be, but long-term in 5, 10, 20 years. And that's going to be a big deal because if you want to end up renting out the house, maybe let's consider conventional. There's a lot of other things that we'll work through with you in that one-on-one consultation, and that's one of them.
Because there are a lot of distinctions to be made about which loan is going to be the right for which individual.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's backtrack to FHA again and tell us about the down payment for an FHA loan.
Yeah, so the down payment requirement is 3.5%.
3.5% of the total loan. So let's say you can find a property for $100,000. That means in order to buy it, you have to have at least $3,500 as the down payment. So that's not so bad, right? It's hard to find a property for $100,000. So we have to be clear about that. But it's only 3.5%, so that's not so bad.
Yeah.
And then what about the minimum for a conventional loan?
So it's actually 3%.
So even a little bit less for a 3% conventional loan.
So you do have to be a first-time home buyer, but your mortgage, there's a difference. That's one of the biggest things in the mortgage world. One of the biggest myths is what is the minimum down? You have options.
Yes.
But yeah, just wanted to clarify. Most people do 5% down because of the cheaper mortgage insurance, but you can do 3% down for a first-time home buyer.
Okay, that's great. Let's talk about why that is, why a bigger down payment would mean that you had less mortgage insurance. So mortgage insurance is there to protect the lender against a 20% loss in equity if they have to foreclose on the property and then sell it to somebody else. As the homeowner, you own the house, you have title to the property. That means as it appreciates, you're the one that owns all of that extra equity. It also means, though, that you have this partner in the loan buying process or the home buying process of the lender. And the lender, because of their years of history with providing loans to people, understands that if you as the homeowner stop making your payments, they are going to have to take the home back, and then they're going to own it. They're going to have the title to it, and they're going to have to find somebody else to sell it to, right? Because they don't want to own your property. And so they're going to take it back, hold it for a time, put it back on the market, sell it to somebody else. And in order to protect their interests, they're going to have you pay for an insurance policy. And that insurance policy covers the first 20% of the equity of the house. So if you put 3.5% down on an FHA loan, you have to buy a policy that protects 16.5%, because that's 20% minus 3.5%. But if you put 10% down, then your insurance policy is only 10%. And so that costs less.
Right. So it's kind of basic math. And if you were giving someone like hundreds of thousands of dollars, it kind of makes sense. The more skin in the game that they're going to have, the more lenient you're going to be on your terms, right?
Right, yes.
So it's the same principle applies in residential lending.
And how does that same principle apply for credit score?
Like the more...
Like explain. the better a home buyer has done at preparing for home ownership, the more lenient their partner, their lending partner is.
Exactly. So in regards to your credit score, the better your credit score is, the better terms you're going to get in regards to the interest rate. So I think it makes a lot of sense, because your credit score is not only a history, but pretty much your grades on how well you've handled debt. So the more that you can show, like let's say you're perfect at handling debt, you're going to get really good terms. If you've been poor with handling your debt, understandably, they're not going to be as great. But that's one of the things that is also unique to us, is we can do what's called a credit rescore.
Okay, tell us about that.
So if someone's coming in to do our one-on-one consultation with us, and we get their credit score, we can see if we were to pay off some debts, maybe pay down some of their credit card balances, how it can improve their credit score. So if there's something that we can do, usually there's one or two things that we can do, especially with first-time home buyers. Like let's say it's paying down an American Express and Chase credit card. That can ultimately boost your score and get you into a higher tier for pricing for your interest rate.
And that gives you a lower monthly payment.
Yep, and that's totally free to any home buyer. So that's a part of the process.
The ability to do the rescore. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so generally, if you have an individual who has really stellar credit and 20% down, they are going to get the best terms.
Correct.
And if you have somebody who is working on improving their credit and has only saved 3 or 3.5%, their terms are going to be the least favorable.
Correct. Yep.
But what if they don't buy that? What if the terms make it so difficult that they don't buy the house? What do they lose out on?
They lose out on a lot of equity. So if you're missing out, it's good to come up with that plan first and foremost so that you're not missing out. I think, and this is my bias, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm pretty sure you could agree, home prices will continue to go up over the course of time. By missing out on that opportunity, you're going to be missing out on the appreciation and equity. So it's going to push you back to buy it at a later time period. And the whole goal of home ownership, in my opinion, is to generate wealth. If that's not like the underlying factor, then I think there's a lot of things that are being missed out on. And so we just want to help make sure that it's a good purchase for you now and in the future. And so we'll try to do whatever we can to help get you into it if that's your goal.
Great, that's great. And I like how you say, if that's your goal, because you're listening to the client. If it's not the right thing for them, it's not the right thing for them. Exactly. And you're not going to push them into something that's not the right thing for them.
Exactly.
And to your earlier point about appreciation, so the Case-Shiller Index shows us that ever since the 1920s, so about 100 years, home prices appreciate in the United States, and it depends, geographically it is different, but home prices appreciate about 5% a year on average over time. So some years you might have 20% increases in appreciation like we did during 2021 and half of 2022. And then some years you might have negative appreciation, right? Like when the housing bubble burst in 07, 08, 09. Those were some rough years for homeowners. But over time, they appreciate 5% a year on average. And so you don't want to spend 3 years saving up for a house you could buy today, because 3 years from now, on average, that house could be 15% more expensive.
Yeah. We just barely helped a veteran, not just, but about 6 months ago. And he was wanting to refinance his home because he's owned it for about 2 to 3 years. And so 2 to 3 years ago, he bought a home with a VA loan. You can do zero money down.
So for all you veterans, that's awesome.
So it's the best, I think, like the best loan program known to man, because it's zero money down, no mortgage insurance, and you get a better interest rate. So anyways, with this VA buyer, he purchased a home 2 years ago for no money down. He had an awesome agent like Mary Lee who was able to negotiate seller paid closing costs, where the seller was able to pay his closing costs, right? Self-explanatory, but he pretty much bought this house with no money out of pocket. 2 years down the line, his home appreciated about $25,000. So me personally, I don't know of any other investment where you can put no money down and still make 25 grand in the course of 2 years.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of benefits to buying a home, and that's just one of like the success stories that we've seen in just a short period.
Yeah, which is great, because not only do you have the benefit of feeling like you're in your home, your launching pad for your life, your sanctuary, your space that you can make be just what you want with the colors that you want and do the yard the way you want and all of those things, but you have an opportunity to build wealth. And one thing I think that a lot of people know but maybe don't realize about investing in property is that because you can take a loan out on this investment, when you make the investment, you gain leverage in the property. So you have, let's say, for example, you've got $100,000 that you can invest in the stock market. And you invest that $100,000 and you get a 10% return, which is pretty great. So a year from now, you'd have $110,000, let's say, that you invested in the stock market. But if you took that $100,000 and made it a 20% investment in a $500,000 property, now you have your same $100,000 joined with this extra $400,000 you got from the lender. So you really have a $500,000 investment in the market. And if you get that 5% return on your investment, now you've got 5% on $500,000. So you made $25,000 in that year instead of $10,000.
Yeah, and I'd take 25 grand over 10 grand any day.
Yeah.
So
Plus you have a place to live, and you got to pay to live somewhere. So you might as well make it work for you.
Plus tax benefits, which is a whole nother podcast.
Yes, which we'll have to have an accountant for.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So wrapping up here, Boston, what is the last piece of advice you would give someone?
I would say the biggest thing that you can do if you're serious about buying a home is to really meet with a lender. Like, you have to meet with them face to face, in my opinion. See if they're going to be a good fit for you, because not everyone's going to be. But it's important that you develop that trust. Buying a home's a big deal. And so I think it's important that you at least meet with them, whether it's over Zoom, face-to-face, butts in chairs, so that you guys can actually hash out all of the ins and outs of your loan.
Okay, that's great advice. I totally agree. Excellent advice. And so if somebody thought, I bet Boston is the fit for me, I'd like to sit down and meet with them, how do people get a hold of you?
So you can text me. I'm pretty available. You can text me at 801-473-4404. Or you can email me at boston.taylor@guildmortgage.net. And either me or someone from my team will be able to schedule you. But I'd like to hop on a call with you first, get a baseline understanding. We'll get you ready for an application, and then meet one-on-one.
Okay. And just one final note, applications are a big pain to fill out. So as you start working on filling out an application online and it seems like it's a big pain and you just want to stop, that's normal. That's how it feels. And so just keep going. that's your first step into the next part of your life, which could be owning a home.
True.
Well, thanks again for joining us today, Boston. You are awesome. I know you're a great loan officer. It's a pleasure to sit down with you and get to know more about your expertise.
Appreciate it.
And thanks for joining us here on Real Estate Real Talk. Our producers are Kat Aspel and Camaro Holt, and you can find us on all of our socials. So we are on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, Blue Skies, Fender, I don't know. We're on all of them. So we'll see you there, and have a great day.